Good evening, folks. Sorry for the weird angle. Got a new setup finally. Just got a computer for Christmas that kind of rebuilt from old parts and new. Part of my Christmas gift from my folks. And been scrounging for parts here and there and finally got it all set up on a desk. Got everything running the way that I want to. It looks great. But I don't have a mount yet for my phone, which I prefer to do my lives on my phone because my old camera for my main computer doesn't work well. And so I'm gonna have to upgrade that eventually, or fix whatever's wrong with this. So you get me on my phone and it's at a weird angle because I'm charging it. Anyway, we're gonna get into Genesis chapter 6 tonight, and we are going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that I covered last time, trying to go too far in Genesis 5, and then we're going to press forward, and I'm going to stop at the end of the chapter. For one thing, Little Bit's sitting right next to me right here, playing Adventure Academy, and she's going to need to get to bed here soon, so. All right, Genesis chapter 6. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. Now that word earth there is a different word than the one used in Genesis 4. In Genesis 4, Cain was cursed and kicked out of the Adama, I think is what it is. And that's the land or the area, the region, as opposed to Eretz, which is what we're talking about now. And let's see, I just want to confirm if I'm pronouncing that right. Here it is. This is Adama. Yeah, Adama. So he's kicked out of the Adama, and then Eretz is what we're talking about now, with the whole earth, and we're talking about the planet. Hey, Steve. Thank you for joining me. So anyway, the men began to multiply on the face of the planet, basically, and daughters were born unto them. That the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all that they chose. And as I talked about last time, the sons of God is always a reference to faithful men. Here we've had two kind of lines, two genealogies. We've had the line of Cain in Genesis 4, and then we had the line of Seth in Genesis 5, and you had the line of Cain as kind of wicked. We get down to Lamech, which Steve has looked up, and his name means powerful, and he has three sons that are kind of the beginning of technology. We start reading about some of the things that they do that are heading into advanced technology, like musical instruments or metallurgy, things like that, even as far as iron goes. And so before the flood, they had pretty powerful technology. And in the sense of what we see after the flood, it takes another 2,600 years for us to get to. I attributed a large portion of that to their long lifespans. Imagine you have almost 1,000 years to live, how much you could learn, especially if you are healthier. Like, we tend to be, I'm overweight. A lot of the foods, they're not good for us these days. They're cheaply made, full of chemicals, that awful stuff. Back then, they ate straight from the land. Their genetic code was not as corrupt as ours is. They were just bigger, stronger, faster. I believe that everybody that lived in that time was giants. We're going to come up to that word here in just a minute, but they have 1,000 years to live with these high-powered brains, and they're able to develop a lot of things in that relatively short period of time, 1,500 years before the flood, whereas we live a tenth of that time, and how much of it do we waste? How much do we spend spinning our wheels and not doing anything of value? So anyway, we're talking here, the sons of God saw the daughters of men. That's the righteous, the righteous line saw the unrighteous line. that they were fair, talking about physical beauty. They were enamored by the physical, and we don't really care. They're not mentioned about the spiritual side of things. The sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were faithful. No, that's not what it says. It says that they were fair, they were good looking, and they took wives of all of which they chose. And Jehovah said, "My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh." And see, I believe that God is still walking among men and talking among men. You have Cain and Abel. Jehovah comes to Cain and he says, "Where's your brother?" And I believe he's still walking and talking amongst them, and he's trying to have this relationship, and nobody's listening. And I said last time that there's a lot of people that would say, if God would just come down and speak to me directly, then I would believe that he was true and I would follow him. They had that, and they still rejected God. And so he says, "My spirit will not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh," or for that he also is flesh. And I think that has to do with their focus is on the physical things, and God is trying to get them to talk about spiritual things and to bring them back into a right relationship with him. And their focus is on making mechanical instruments, metallurgy. They're worried about their farms. They're worried about the haughty over in the land of Nod or whatever, and they're not focused on the right things. And so he says, I'm going to give them 120 years, and that's all. I'm not going to give them any more. And says in verse 4, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. The idea of being giants, the word Nephilim there is just giants. There's this silly idea that's very popular that somehow angels came down from heaven and saw how good looking the human females were. First of all, angel compared to human in terms of beauty, I mean, that's to see physical beauty in humans when you are in the presence of God is nonsense. But on top of that, we see that there's giants here. How did they survive the flood? You get to people like Goliath and his brothers, the Anakim, all of these people that were after the flood in the time of David. Like, we're not even talking about Abraham. We're talking about the time of David. This is 1,000 years later. How are there giants still in the earth if they all got wiped out in the flood? And so that doesn't make any sense. But see, what it is that everybody was a giant. Everybody was bigger, stronger, faster. And when we think giants, of course, we're confused by all of the media hype, the movies, and we're looking at 18-foot tall and whatever. In fact, if you get into the fictional book of Enoch, which is a hoot to read, it is. I mean, Frank Peretti only dreams of writing that level of fiction. But they have giants in there that are like 4 miles high. It's like when you get into the measurements and stuff, is so absurdly tall. But that's one of the reasons I don't think Enoch is good for being part of the Bible, is because of the absurdities that it has in there. But anyway, you have these giants that survive the flood, and there's no other way for them to do it except to have been related to Noah. That Noah and his family themselves were giants. On top of that, when we get into the building of the ark, a cubit is from fingertip to elbow. Well, my fingertip to elbow is not all that big. We can think about it in terms of feet or whatever, but can you imagine Noah being like a Shaquille O'Neal or Manute Bol or some of these guys that are just enormous compared to the rest of us? Their cubit is a little bit longer. You have a little bit bigger ark. You have a little bit more room for these animals. So they didn't have a standard of measurement like we do. So anyway, Giants are nothing special other than just being really tall. Saul was one of those guys, at least among the Hebrew. But there were giants in the earth in those days, and they were of old mighty men which were of old, men over down. Verse 5, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the eretz, the earth, the whole land, the what we would call planet. They wouldn't think about it in those terms back then, but and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Man, I mean, we look at the world around us and we talk about how bad it is, but can you imagine being in that world, especially if you're somebody like Noah or you're somebody like Enoch? And I looked it up. I was looking at the timelines and stuff. When Noah was born, Enos had just died. The son of Seth had just died 16 years prior. You had Canaan was still alive, Mahalalel was still alive, Jared was still alive. Of course, Enoch was gone. Methuselah was still alive, and of course, Lamech was still alive. There's no standard of measurement. How did Noah build the ark to God's instructions? Because he had 2 arms that were fingertip to elbow. That's what a cubit was. That was the standard of measurement, was Noah's arm. I'm just saying they didn't have a standard of measurement like our foot or our centimeter or whatever, where we have a bar of metal kept at a certain temperature over in England. This is what a meter means. They didn't have that. They just, God says build it a cubit long. Well, Noah's like, okay, cubit from here to here. All right, I got you. And that's just what they cut it. They just didn't do it like we did. So anyway, you had all these people that are still alive, and you can imagine, where did Noah get his righteousness from in terms of the teaching and the passing down. He didn't really meet Enoch, but Enos and Canaan, Mahalalel, how righteous are these people? How righteous is Jared at this time? How righteous is Methuselah, who died the year of the flood? I'm actually looking at this. Lamech died 5 years before the flood. So was he righteous? So you have this line down through Noah where you have very few righteous people. And by the time we're talking about Noah, we're talking that everyone else, generally speaking, is wicked. Hey Cameron, we're in Genesis 6 right now. I'm in about verse 5. But everybody in this time, in the whole world, is focused on these physical things. The sons of God, these sons and daughters that all of these generations are bearing, are looking over at Cain's line, and they're seeing how good looking they are. They're looking at their technology. They're looking at all their physical things, and it's corrupting them. And they're choosing to follow after these physical things and not after spiritual things. And so their thoughts are only evil continuously. And it repented Jehovah that he had made man on the earth. Again, that's Eretz. And he grieved him at his heart. And Jehovah said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the earth. For it repenteth me that I have made them. Hey, Abby, we're in Genesis 6 right now. So, I get this question a lot, talking about the idea of free will, and is it right that God would make men who he foreknew were going to be wicked? And I come to verses like this where it says that it repented Jehovah. This idea of repentance, the word means to turn away from a certain path and towards another path. And it's not just sorrow, but there's an actual turning away. And so God has done a thing, but now he is he's changing his mind. And being a free-willed being, God is capable of doing that. I don't understand fully how an omniscient being who exists in eternity, who can see the entire timeline simultaneously and know all of every little detail that's going on, how every quantum in the entire universe is happening simultaneously. That's how powerful God is. How does he know what's going on and interact with the timeline, and we still have free will? But I do understand that that's what the case is, so much so that God is changing his direction here. And instead of allowing man to continue, he's going to wipe him off the face of the earth. But, verse 8, Noah found grace in the eyes of Jehovah. And so, why does God allow wicked men? Why does God create men knowing that they're going to be wicked? Why did God create Adam and Eve knowing that the majority of their descendants at this point in time, except for 8 of them, were going to be wholly wicked? And I believe the answer is the same for why does God allow evil at all? One of the big atheist arguments is the problem of evil. Well, number one, you can't even define evil unless there's a God. But number two, the idea is that God allows evil to continue so that good is understood, so that our need for God is understood. When does courage happen? Courage happens in the midst of the storm. If there's no storm, there's no courage. There's no facing of fear. When does righteousness shine forth? It's in the darkness. So God allows the darkness to exist, the wickedness to happen, so that good can shine forth, so that his glory can shine through us, as long as we're following what his will is. So Noah finds favor or grace in the eyes of Jehovah. And these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. And Noah walked with God. Man, just to see that, we're back to Enoch level goodness here. Noah was a just man. What does that mean? He lived according to the laws of God. He was perfect in his generations. Does that mean he was perfectly sinless? I can't make that. I don't have enough information at this point. But perfect in his generations compared to everybody else around him, this dude was righteous. He was so good, a shining light compared to everybody else. And he walked with God. Well, who was the last person to say that they walked with God? Well, that was Enoch. Noah is comparable to Enoch. So this guy is a righteous guy. And can I say that he was sinless, just like Enoch? I don't know. But at this point in time, I would not be, it would not frighten me to say that probably. I wouldn't have a problem at all if God were to, it would not surprise me at all. If God, we get to heaven, we ask these questions. Well, God, what was Noah like before the flood? Well, he was sinless. That would not surprise me at all. Enoch, sinless, would not surprise me at all. Why? They were just, they were righteous, they walked with God. How do you walk with God? You follow after him, you obey his commands. And so these are really, really good people amidst a very, very evil, wicked, perverse generation. Verse 10, and Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. My mom just texted me asking me a Bible question. That's what the text thing that you heard, so I'll have to answer that when I get off of here. So the earth was filled with violence, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. See, now we're back to God. We're back to God. We were talking about Noah finding grace in the eyes of Jehovah. That's the personal, what I believe, God the Son at this point, the theophany. But now we're back to God, the Creator God, the one who has the authority to do what he's about to do. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me. For the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So that's a rich verse. First of all, the end of all flesh. God was going to kill everybody, right? Romans 10, I'm sorry, Romans 3:10. There's nobody righteous, no, not one. Or Romans 3:23. For all have sinned. Right? That word all, it's all inclusive, isn't it? The end of all flesh is come before me. Oh, but there's an exception. See, God is speaking by inspiration through Moses, and I think in Romans chapter 3 through Paul in a generality. It's not an absolute allness, because we know Jesus hadn't sinned. We know Jesus was righteous. We know that there were other examples of righteous and just men. Cornelius was a just man. It says in Acts chapter 10. So does that mean he was sinless? I don't think so. He had to be immersed. But the way that this is speaking here, the way that God uses all, I think is more talking about the groups of people, the nations of people, or the people in general, as opposed to every single individual. And I think this is one of the evidences of that. The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Is God going to destroy the planet here? No, he's not going to destroy the planet. We read in 2 Peter 3, there are actually 3 sets of heavens and earth that are talked about in 2 Peter 3. The first heavens and earth we're about to read of being destroyed. And then we get to the second heavens and the second earth, and that's the Jewish state that Moses is going to bring us to through Genesis and into Exodus. And then when the Jewish state ends, we get to the third heaven, the new heavens and the new earth. And that's a new system of authority and the people being ruled over, and that is Christ as king and the church as the people. So men corrupted themselves, not men were corrupted by something else, aka ancestry. Yeah, that's exactly right. Flesh corrupted his way. It was a choice. A choice was made. Hey Chandler, we're in Genesis chapter 6. We're about verse 13 or so. But yeah, Steve, you're exactly right. Man made the choice. Man is the one who is deciding to walk away from God. It's not that some lineage or some genetic defect or some spiritual corruption or some kind of something has corrupted them. They just chose to be that way. Yeah, exactly. Well, in verse 22, Romans 3:22 through 24, if you look at that text, that's just talking about Christians anyway. You can't have an all there without dealing with that. Those 2 verses as immediate context. Otherwise, you get into universalism. The all of verse 23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, was the same all that was being justified by the grace. So we're talking about Christians there anyway. All right, so 2 Peter 3, we talk about the destructions of the heavens and the earth. We're not talking about the literal destruction of the sky and the planet. We're talking about the people. And God is saying, I am going to destroy, I'm going to wipe man off the face of the earth, except for you, Noah. So verse 14, make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. What if Noah had decided he wanted to use a different wood? What if he wanted to use oak or pine? Would that have been okay? Would that have been following God's command? God didn't say not to. Could he have used metal? I mean, we build all our ships out of metal these days. Could God have, God said build gopher wood, and Noah's like, you know what, God, that's great and all, but I have all this metal that they've been working with. I'm going to use that instead. It's a little bit tougher. You didn't say not to. When God authorizes a thing, when he is specific and says do this thing, that automatically eliminates everything else. When God says worship me in song, that automatically eliminates all other forms of music. That's what I believe. Verse 15, and this is the fashion which you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits. That's these things. 300 cubits. The breadth of it 50 cubits. And the height of it 30 cubits. Now there's an ark encounter thing that I want to go visit. because I think it would be cool. I don't think they built it big enough. I think they built it according to our cubits. I think they built it to the 1.5 foot specifications that everybody thinks that a cubit is. I don't think they built it to the giant cubit. But anyway, I might ask them about that. I would love to. I got to talk to Danny Faulkner, one of the science guys that works with Ken Ham and them. And I think it's right. Or maybe he's Answers in... Anyway, yeah. Dr. Faulkner works with Answers in Genesis. And I think that's Ken Ham. But anyway... he was a pretty nice guy. We talked astronomy and we talked astrophysics and stuff, and that was a really cool conversation that I had for about an hour. But anyway, he makes it according to these specifications. And a window you will make in the ark, and in a cubit shall you finish it above, and the door of the ark shall thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories you shall make it. So God's really specific here. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. Now, here's the interesting thing. Oh, hold on. Let me do this. Pause for a minute. Are you still playing? Ooh, are you still playing? Okay. Hopefully that did it. Okay, cool. She's back. All right. Did you know that the second heaven and the second earth of 2 Peter 3 were also destroyed by a flood? If you look at the prophecies concerning and surrounding the end of the Jewish state, did you know that the Jewish state was said to have been destroyed, or was going to be destroyed by a flood? Now, it wasn't a literal flood of water. It wasn't the cataclysmos of water that we see here. It was a cataclysmos of fire, or a flood of fire, in the sense of a huge, vast army, the Roman army. And so both the first and the second earths were destroyed by a flood. Look it up. Do a word search. Do a search on the word flood throughout the Old Testament and in Revelation. You can do it all the way through the New Testament. And you'll see, hey, that word flood, that's a thing, a tool of judgment from God, whatever form it takes. Verse 18, but with you I will establish my covenant, and you shall come into the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with thee, and of every living thing of flesh, 2 of every sort shall you bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee, and they shall be male and female. I guess there's no multi-gendered animals at that time. Of fowls after their kind, of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto you to keep them alive. That includes the dinosaurs, by the way. 2 dinosaurs of every kind, not of every species. That's not what the Bible's saying here. We don't have to worry about species. We're just talking about kinds here, which is a little bit broader category. So he didn't bring 2 pumas and 2 tigers and 2 lions and 2 Bengal tigers or 2 panthers or whatever, 2 house cats. He's brought 2 cats. That's all he had to bring, was 2 cats. 2 dogs, something along those lines. But so we're looking at 2 of every kind, and I believe that includes the dinosaurs. And verse 21, and take you unto thee all food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. Thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him, so did he. So 120 years, Noah's got to build the ark according to these exact specifications. God specified, he couldn't deviate from that just because God specified. And during that time also, he's got to grow the food and gather the food for all of these animals. Now, the nice thing is, the animals are all herbivores, according to what we read in Genesis chapter 1. There's no indication anywhere that any of these things are eating meat yet. That's convenient, because when they get on the ark, when Noah didn't have to worry about them eating each other. So they get on the ark, they get in their pens. If anything gets out, no worries about them eating anything. Okay, that movie, Noah, with, what's his name, Gladiator dude. Man, You talk about a travesty. They got all kinds of things wrong there. But anyway, anything for a buck, I guess. But it says, thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him, so did he. Noah did everything because he was a just man. He walked with God. He followed God's commands. He didn't add to God's commands. He didn't try to modify. He didn't think he was better than God and say, you know what, God, I'm going to do it my way. I just believe you, and that's enough, and then nothing else matters. I can just do whatever I want. That's not what God does when he has a relationship with us. God says, do this because I know best. And it is for man to fear God and keep his commandments. That is our purpose. That is why we exist. And I believe Noah was one of those that did that. At least up to this point. We'll talk more about what happened to Noah as we continue through these chapters. So anyway, there's Genesis 6, another one in the, what do they call it, in the bucket. And I got to put the little one to bed. I got to answer my mom's Bible question first, and then I got to put a little bit to bed here. So enjoying my time home, enjoying my time with the kids. So Brian, but that, as I said last time, Moses is writing. He's writing in terms that the Israelites would understand. It does not mean that before the flood, those were considered edible animals. If God says, no, I want you to take 7 of these kinds of animals onto the ark, and God doesn't necessarily tell him why, and then Moses later understands those to be clean animals, then he's going to tell the Israelites, yeah, God tells Noah to take 7 of these particular kind, because after, when we read in Genesis 9, hey, Noah gets to start eating animals and sacrificing animals for the purposes of food and stuff, then he understands what clean is. But we don't even have an understanding of clean versus not clean animals until the law of Moses. Noah doesn't have any command to eat specific. He doesn't have the dietary laws. Abraham didn't have the dietary laws. Isaac, Jacob, those guys didn't have the dietary laws. We don't get to the dietary laws until Moses. So Noah would not have necessarily understood clean animals, but Moses is the one writing, and he's writing to the Israelite people during this 40 years of wandering, setting up the nation, writing their constitution, and they would have understood what clean animals, even if Noah didn't. So there isn't a necessary implication here that Noah ate these animals just because Moses calls them clean. I believe very firmly, because of the statement in Genesis 1, again, going back to this idea of specificity. Well, no, hey, Aaron, we're wrapping up a discussion on Genesis 6. We're talking right now about clean food, and did Noah and the people before him, did they eat clean food? Not right now. You'll just have to find something else to do. Get your tablet. So in Genesis 1, starting in verse where is it at? Yeah, verse 30. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creeps upon the earth, when there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. So that's for all of the animals. And then verse 29, right before that, and God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. So God is specifically saying you can eat these things. And when God specifies, it automatically eliminates everything else. So that God specified to Adam and Eve fruits and vegetables, that eliminated everything else. That's the way specificity works. The law of specificity is a powerful hermeneutic when trying to understand what the Bible says. When God says do this, no other type in that category is admissible because God has already specified. It's like going to, please stop. Please stop. Find something else to do. I'm trying to finish this up. Your tablet.
My tablet's dead.
Your tablet's been charging this whole time. It should be fine.
1%. And that means it's dead.
I'm trying to wrap up. I need you to go find something else to do. Okay? Yeah, definitely getting tired. Time for bed. So anyway, if you go to Taco Bell and you say, I want a taco, and I would like just beef, cheese, and lettuce. And then you get to the window and they charge you $150, and they start handing you everything on the menu, and you say, I didn't order these, and they say, well, you didn't say not to. That doesn't make any sense. And so that idea of specificity makes sense in every other aspect of our life, but when we get into the scriptures, the idea of specificity suddenly gets thrown out the window. We suddenly just can't reason properly. But God specified here, and then we get to Genesis chapter 9, which I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself here. Genesis chapter 9, there's a reversal. In verse 3, every moving thing that lives shall be meat for you. Well, this is where God is allowing the meats to be eaten, but there is no clean versus unclean for Noah. God he's brought these creatures that Moses knows to be clean, that the Israelites are being taught to be clean, but Noah doesn't necessarily know them to be clean. Hey man, don't knock Taco Bell. When you're as poor as I am, Taco Bell is lifeblood. So why bring 7 of what Moses would understand to be clean animals? Well, you want them to proliferate more than the others, especially after they get off the ark, if they can eat each other. The animals are still going to be eating, for several generations, they're going to still be eating a lot of plant matter. And they've got to multiply. But, it doesn't take long before you start having the animals realize, hey, something's missing in my diet. I'm not getting the nutrition and the health that I need. And they start killing each other because they're not getting enough protein or whatever it is that they need. And so you have the carnivorous creatures that we know today, several generations after the ark, they're starting to eat other animals because their instincts are kicking in, and they know, hey, because I'm getting more UV radiation and my genetics are off and the viruses aren't working the way that they're supposed to work to correct our genetic anomalies and stuff, I've got to supplement with protein that I cannot find in plant matter. That's not to say there's not protein in plant matter, but just the way that the proteins are delivered. So they start eating it. And so I believe very firmly that it is reasonable to conclude that neither man nor animal ate meat before the flood, didn't have a reason to, that man was specified to eat plants and was not allowed to or authorized to eat anything other than plant matter until after he got off the ark. And so, you can disagree with me. That's fine. I'm not trying to force anybody to believe anything here. I'm just telling you what I believe. That's what these videos are about, is just going through and telling you what I believe. But, I believe the Bible is very explicit about it in Genesis 1 and Genesis 9, and very clear. So, yeah, definitely. So, all right, I got to get the little one to bed. So thank y'all for joining me tonight, and we'll probably hit Genesis 7, 8, maybe even get to 9 sometime this week. So I'm going to get her to bed, and appreciate y'all being here tonight. Have a good one.